She had been tied to the post as prey for wolves. Hours had passed since rough hands dragged her here, bound her wrists high until the ropes cut deep and blood drained from her fingers. Her ankles were lashed tight so she could not kneel, could not rest, could only stand straight against the cedar pole. They had left her for the animals, left her as punishment or as a warning, or perhaps just to be rid of her. Naelli would not beg. She would not give her cousin or the men who believed his lies the satisfaction. But her shoulders screamed with pain, her legs trembled from fatigue, and her breath came shallow in the thin desert air. Shame had long since passed into cold resolve. If she was to die, she would die standing. The wolves already knew. Their bodies wove through the brush below the ridge, grey and lean and restless, slipping in and out of sight. Their paws made no sound on the hard ground, but their low growls and sharp yips rose whenever she stirred. They were patient. They had smelled her blood and sweat, and they would wait until night before closing in. The wind swept down from the north, sharp and bitter, carrying with it the scent of frost and dust. It carried her fear, too, though she tried to bury it under clenched jaw and steady eyes. Far to the south, Luke Harland guided his horse across broken country. He wasn't heading anywhere important. He rarely did anymore. His scouting days with the cavalry were behind him, his small homestead gone after his wife's burial, leaving him with only a horse, a rifle, and too many miles to cover. He drifted because moving felt better than remembering. That afternoon, the desert had been quiet, and quiet usually meant safety. But as the light began to fade, he heard them, wolves, howling in a way that set his instincts sharp. The calls overlapped, concentrated, circling. It wasn't the sound of a pack hunting free game. This was the sound of prey pinned. He pulled. The reins paused and let the wind bring the sound again. Then he nudged his horse north. His hand rested loose on the Winchester at his saddle. When the ridge came into view, Luke spotted the cedar post first. Then he saw her. At first, she looked like another weather-worn snag against the skyline. But the torn dress moved in the wind. The dark hair tangled across her shoulders, the ropes cutting white lines into her skin. Luke's stomach tightened. He reined up 100 yards out. The wolves were already inside 50, pacing half circles, testing how close they dared. One crouched, shoulders rolling as it eased forward. Luke worked the lever on his rifle and fired into the dirt ahead of its paws. The shot cracked through the ridge, sending echoes flying. The wolf jerked back, startled. Another lingered, growling low. Luke chambered a second round and fired high over its back. The pack scattered, retreating into the brush but not gone. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching the frozen soil. The rifle stayed in his grip, sweeping the horizon. Wolves were one thing, men were another, and trouble often came in pairs, as I. He drew near. He saw her face clearly. She was younger than he'd guessed, pale with exhaustion, but her eyes sharp, alive, watching him as if to measure whether he was another executioner or something different. Luke slung the rifle onto his shoulder, drew the knife from his belt, and stepped in close. The stink of sweat and fear clung to the air. He slid the blade under the rope, felt the tension give, and saw red lines blaze across her skin as it snapped free. Her arms dropped, and with them her strength. She nearly collapsed, but Luke caught her by the waist before she hit the ground. She was warm despite the cold, trembling but still proud enough to wrench herself upright the moment she found balance. He crouched to cut her ankles loose, then stepped back, giving her the space she clearly wanted. She pressed her back against the post, breathing hard, her eyes still locked on him. Luke said nothing. He didn't like crowding words into spaces they didn't belong. Instead, he unhooked the canteen from his saddle and held it out. For a moment she hesitated. Then she drank, water spilling down her chin in rivulets, but she didn't stop until her thirst eased. From the saddle, Luke pulled his coat and draped it around her shoulders. She looked at it like a trap, then finally pulled it tight against The wind. The wolves still circled. Luke could hear them shifting in the brush, not gone, only waiting. He tilted his head toward the horse. She understood, though she said nothing. He lifted her into the saddle and mounted behind, steadying her with one arm so she would not slip. Together, they moved off the ridge. No words passed between them. Only the rhythm of the horse's steps, the creak of leather, and the long stretch of desert silence. The wolves did not follow far, but Naelli could still hear them. Their low growls rose and fell behind the brush as Luke guided the horse down the slope. The pack wasn't gone. They were circling wider now, biding their time until the desert. Night favored them again. Naelli leaned into the sway of the saddle, not by choice, but because her legs had gone weak. Every jolt of the horse rattled her aching arms, raw from the ropes. Still, she kept her jaw set tight, eyes fixed on the horizon. She would not look broken in front of this stranger. Luke kept his arm firm around her, not out of tenderness, but necessity. If she slipped, they both would pay for it. His eyes never stopped scanning the ridges, the brush, the horizon. He knew, better than to think the wolves were the only danger here. Men had done this to her, not beasts, and men rarely left loose ends. The sun bled away, leaving the desert cold and colorless. By the time they reached the canyon mouth, the wind had sharpened, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke. Luke's cabin came into view, a squat shape of rough-hewn logs set against the rock wall, its back braced into stone for shelter. A small corral sat empty beside it, and a tarp-covered stack of cut wood leaned against the wall. Luke swung down first. He caught her waist as she slid from the saddle. Her legs buckled immediately. She caught herself on the saddle horn, drawing a sharp breath through her teeth, before standing upright again. She refused his hand, steadying herself on her own. Her eyes roved across the cabin, measuring it like she measured him, counting doors, windows, corners. A woman left to die didn't step into a man's home blindly. Inside, the cabin was simple: a bed against the far wall, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with jars of beans, flour, and coffee, a small iron stove smoldering in the corner. It smelled of wood smoke, old leather, and years of solitude. Luke closed the door against the wind, set the latch, and removed his hat. He set his rifle near the wall where it was always within reach. Then he nodded toward the bed. "Sit," he said. Naelli hesitated, standing stiff, her back still to the wall. Finally, she stepped forward and lowered herself onto the edge of the mattress. Her hand stayed hidden inside his coat, fingers curling into the buffalo hide lining like it was the first solid thing she'd held in days. Luke filled a tin cup from the bucket and handed it to her. She took it without hesitation this time. When she lifted her wrists, he saw them clearly in the firelight, raw, swollen bands marked by rope burns deep enough to split skin. Without a word, Luke knelt, pulling a small box from under the table. He set out a strip of clean cloth and a bottle of whiskey. "This'll sting," he said evenly, pouring the liquor over the cloth. She flinched when he pressed it to her wrist, her jaw locking tight, but she did not pull away. He worked carefully, binding each wound with fresh strips. When he finished, she drew her hands back under the coat. For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. The wind outside whistled against the shutters, the only sound between them. Finally, Luke spoke, his voice low, almost matter-of-fact. "I was running traps south, heard the wolves howling. Too close together for hunting. Figured something was keeping them in one place. Didn't expect to find you." Her eyes lifted to his, sharp and searching. "You could have left me," she said flatly. "I could have," he agreed. "Didn't seem right." He struck a match and lit the stove properly, setting beans to warm in the pot. The small space filled with the smell of food. Her gaze followed every motion he made, suspicion still flickering, but softened now by exhaustion. When he slid a plate toward her, she hesitated, then ate in small, careful bites. She ate like someone used to hunger, steady, efficient, unwilling to waste. Luke didn't press her with questions. He'd learned long ago that some answers came only with time. Instead, he spread a blanket across the bed and laid his coat out. "On the floor near the door. You take the bed tonight," he said. "I'll take the floor." Her eyes flicked to him, searching for the price hidden in his voice. There was none. When she lay back slowly, blanket pulled up to her chin, he caught the gleam of her eyes in the dim lamplight. She was still watching. Him, still measuring. Luke knew trust wouldn't come in one night. That was fine. He'd been alone a long time. He knew some things couldn't be rushed. By the time the fire sank low, the wind outside had grown harsher, rattling the shutters. She didn't speak, but her breathing shifted, no longer shallow with fear, but steady, deep, holding to life. Luke leaned against the wall, rifle across his knees, and thought, tomorrow might bring questions. Tomorrow might bring danger. But tonight, at least, she was alive. Morning came with silence too heavy to trust. Luke stirred before first light, as he always did. But even in the dim gray, he felt it. The air pressed close, no coyotes calling, no wind shifting the brush. He knew enough of the land to read the quiet as a warning. Inside the cabin, Naelli was already awake. She sat at the table, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, eyes sharp beneath the mess of dark hair. She had not slept deeply, that much was clear. Luke moved with habit, stoking. The stove, scraping metal against iron as he coaxed fire from embers. He didn't look at her until the flames caught. Then he saw what the dim light had hidden the night before. Bruises along her collarbone, mottled yellow at the edges, older than the rope burns. He didn't ask, he didn't need to. He knew men's cruelty when he saw it. "You sleep?" he asked instead. "A little," she answered, voice low, edged with caution. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and set one near her. She hesitated, then pulled herself to the table, cupping it with both hands. The steam rose between them, and in its curl Luke saw the flicker of something, guarded, but not broken. "You said I could have left you," Luke said, his voice even. "Means you know someone may come looking, someone who won't like finding you alive." Naelli's eyes shifted to the steam, then back to him. Her jaw worked before she spoke. "My cousin," she said finally. "He wanted my father's rifle. When he died, I would not give it. He told the others lies, that I traded with men outside our band, that I shamed them. Some believed him, some didn't care. He took the rifle and he took me to the post." Luke's eyes narrowed slightly. "And left you for the wolves?" She nodded once, steady despite the words. "It's not the first time someone has been left that way, but it was the first time for me." Luke leaned back in his chair. His face didn't change much, but something behind his eyes tightened. He had seen men lie for land, for coin, for nothing at all, but to betray blood for a rifle, that carried its own weight. "If your cousin hears you're alive," Luke said, "he'll try again." Naelli didn't hesitate. "Yes, he'll want me gone before anyone asks why he lied." Luke set his cup down. The words came plain, like fact, not promise. "Then we'll make sure he doesn't find you." She studied him, searching for the trick in his tone, the condition. There was none. Breakfast was quiet. Bread torn from a small loaf, beans reheated in the pot. When it was done, Luke handed her a pair of wool socks and an old flannel shirt that would hang loose on her. She accepted both, changed in the corner with her back turned, while he stepped outside to check the horse. The ground near the corral caught his eye immediately. Fresh tracks cut through the frost, 2 sets of hooves passing close in the night. Whoever they were, they hadn't stopped, but they'd come near enough to see smoke if they were looking. Luke crouched, tracing the marks with his hand. They hadn't been there yesterday. He stood slowly, jaw hard, then returned inside. Naelli's eyes found his face as soon as the door shut. She read the change before he spoke. "Riders," he said. "2 of them. Didn't stop, but they passed. Close." Her back straightened. "If it's them, it means they know I'm here," Luke finished. He checked his rifle, working the action with practiced ease. "And if it's them, it means your cousin will know before long." Naelli's hands clenched the edge of the blanket. She said nothing, but her eyes didn't look away from his. She was measuring him again, not for the first time, but this time with something new, less suspicion, more calculation. Could she trust this man to stand when others had turned away? Luke didn't speak the truth aloud, but it ran plain in his mind. He had done nothing for anyone in years. That ended when he cut her down. He showed her where the water buckets sat, where the spare cartridges were kept, how to slide the bolt on the door if someone came while he was outside. She listened closely, memorizing every word. By midday, frost had melted. They worked together in the yard, splitting wood. Luke swung with easy strength, while Naelli lifted the axe with controlled effort, every strike showing she had known hard work before. When she caught him watching, she said, "You think I can't?" "I think you can," he answered simply, and went back to his pile. The light was fading when Luke made a slow circle past the corral, scanning the horizon. No riders in sight, but the memory of the morning's tracks stayed fresh. He returned to the smell of stew warming on the stove. Naelli sat by the fire, stirring the pot with steady hands. The cabin felt different somehow, less like a shelter borrowed for a night, more like a place being claimed. As they ate, she fixed her eyes on him and asked, "Why were you really in the Badlands?" Luke set his spoon down. "Habit," he said. "I go where it's quiet. No one to answer to." "Then why answer to me?" His gaze met hers, steady. "Because leaving you there would have made me no better than the ones who tied you up." She said nothing after that, but her eyes softened. Just slightly, but enough for Luke to notice. When night came, Luke bedded down on the floor again. This time, as the fire sank low, Naelli's voice reached across the silence. "Good night." Luke. It was the first time she had spoken his name. To him, it meant more than thanks. The second morning broke too quiet to ignore. Luke stepped outside with his coffee, scanning the horizon as dawn lit the flats in pale yellow. The frost crunched beneath his boots, but his eyes caught something else. Smoke, faint and thin, drifting from the south ridge. It wasn't theirs. Someone was camped too close. His jaw tightened. He didn't linger. Inside, Naelli sat at the table, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, her dark eyes following his every move. When he closed the door behind him, she didn't ask if something was wrong. She already knew. "Smoke?" she said simply. He nodded once. "Not from our chimney." Her grip tightened around the tin cup in her hands. "It's them." "Maybe," Luke said. He set his rifle on the table, checked the chamber. "Either way, we treat it like it is." He crossed to the wall, unhooked his second rifle, and set it in front of her. The wood was worn smooth from years of use, but the action was clean. Bolts oiled, cartridges fresh. "If someone comes through that door who isn't me," he said, "you don't wait for words." Naelli's eyes held his, unflinching. After a moment, she nodded. Luke stepped out again, circling the corral with deliberate pace. The smoke still rose faint on the horizon. He didn't approach. Not yet. He wasn't ready to show himself. The time he returned, Naelli was still at the table, rifle resting across her lap. Her posture wasn't fearful. It was ready. She was no stranger to weapons, he realized. "You've handled a rifle before," he said. "Yes," she answered plainly. Luke nodded toward the window. "Then you'll carry it when we ride." Trouble sees an armed rider. It thinks twice. Her mouth twitched, almost like she might smile, though it passed quick as it came. The rest of the morning moved under the weight of knowing eyes might already be on them. Luke showed her small things, how to slide the back door bolt low, how the shelves could be dropped to cover the windows, how the corral fence could be used as a choke point if riders pressed too close. She listened carefully, committing every step. By midday, they worked side by side, splitting wood. She swung the axe clean, no wasted motion. At one point, she caught him watching again. "You think I can't?" "I think you can," he said, same as before. That night, stew simmered over the fire. They ate in silence until Naelli's voice cut through, low but steady. "Why help me?" she asked, her eyes fixed on him now, no hesitation. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, or if what my cousin said was true." Luke set his spoon down slowly. His voice came calm, the way a man speaks when the truth is simple. "I've seen too many left to die, because nobody wanted the trouble. I'm not doing that again." She studied him, searching his face for weakness, for deceit. "And if I bring trouble to your door?" Luke didn't look away. "Then I deal with it." The answer seemed to strike her more than any kindness might have. Her shoulders eased slightly, not in surrender, but in recognition. For the first time, she believed he meant it. That night, as the wind rattled the shutters, she said softly, "I'm glad you came when you did." Luke didn't reply, but lying on the floor with his rifle across his knees, he thought the same. The next morning, the silence felt wrong again. Luke stepped outside before sunrise, scanning the flats. 2 riders moved slow in the distance, angling through low ground rather than taking the open trail. They were cautious, deliberate. He watched until they dipped out of sight. Then he went back inside. Naelli was braiding her hair at the table. She looked up, reading his face before he spoke. "They're coming," he said simply. Her hands stilled. "My cousin's men?" Scar on the cheek. Blue army coat, exactly like you said. Her jaw clenched tight. "If they see me, they'll tell him. He'll come. Then they won't see you." Luke grabbed a blanket, tossed it toward her. "Back crawl space. Stay low. Don't come out till I tell you." "I can shoot," she reminded him. "I know, but right now I need them thinking you're gone, not holed up here." For a moment, she studied him, eyes fierce, like she might argue. But then she nodded, pulled the blanket around her, and slipped through the back. By the time the riders reached the corral, Luke was outside, leaning against the fence post, hat low, hands easy. But close to his gun, the man with the scar gave a thin smile. "Heard you been seen with a woman, Apache, about yay high. Black hair." Luke shrugged. "Haven't had company in months. You might want to check your sources." The man in the army coat shifted, eyes scanning the cabin. "We know she was. At the ridge." She didn't walk away on her own. Luke's gaze stayed steady. "You calling me a liar?" Neither answered. Silence stretched. Horses twitched under the weight of it. Luke let it pull tight, then pushed off the fence post. "You're not going to find what you're looking for here," he said. "Best turn around while the trail's still open." Scar's smile faded. "We'll be back," he said flatly. "Maybe with more men." "Bring whoever you want," Luke replied. "Won't change the answer." The riders turned slow, making sure he saw they weren't in a hurry. Only after they disappeared over the rise did Luke exhale. Inside, Naelli emerged from the crawl space, dust clinging to her dress. Her eyes burned. "They'll tell him." "Probably," Luke said, setting the rifle back on the wall. "Means we've got days. Maybe less." She looked at him hard, steady. "You could still tell me to leave." "I could," Luke said. "But I'm not going to." For the first time, she didn't look away. "Then I'll fight with you when—" "They come," Luke gave a short nod. He'd lived too many years planning only for himself. That ended the moment he cut her down. The cousin's men didn't vanish. They circled. Luke saw the signs before the day was out. Fresh hoof prints near the creek, too many for strays, and the faint smell of wood smoke on the wind. The riders had not gone far. They were waiting, probing, planning. He said nothing at first. Naelli didn't need the words. She read it in his face the moment he stepped back into the cabin. Her eyes hardened, but she didn't flinch. "They'll come again," she said. "Yes," Luke replied. He set his rifle on the table. "And next time they won't ride off so easy." They worked side by side as the hours passed. Luke showed her every weakness the cabin held, where the shutters rattled, where the roof seam caught, where the second door sat hidden behind brush. He explained how the shelves could be dropped to block windows, how firewood could be stacked to create cover. Naelli listened, eyes sharp, committing each step as if her survival depended on it. Because it did. By midday, Luke placed his knife in her hand. "Show me," he said. She didn't hesitate. Her stance was low, steady. She struck with quick, efficient motions, short jabs, no wasted effort. Luke watched closely, noting the control in her arms, the steadiness in her eyes. "You've been taught," he said. "My father," she answered, voice flat. "Before he died." Luke gave a single nod. The truth was plain. She wasn't just a woman tied to a post. She was someone who had been fighting to hold her own long before he came along. That night, the wind rose again, rattling the shutters, carrying the smell of frost and sage. Inside, the cabin burned warm. They ate stew, in silence until Naelli's voice broke it. "Why help me?" she asked again, firmer now. "You've told me once. I want to know the real reason." Luke set his spoon down. His eyes didn't leave hers. "I've seen too many left to die because it was easier. You were tied up there because no one wanted the trouble of standing for you. I'm not built that way. If I'd left you, I'd be no better than them." Her gaze lingered on him, searching, as if to test the weight of his words. Slowly, her shoulders eased. "And if I bring trouble to your door?" Luke didn't blink. "Then I'll face it here." It was not romance, not comfort. It was truth. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. The next morning, the quiet returned, heavy as stone. Luke stepped outside before first light, his rifle in hand. From the ridge to the south, smoke rose again. Thicker now, a camp that had not moved. His jaw tightened. When he returned, Naelli was already awake, her hair loose over her shoulders. She looked at him with a question in her eyes, but he answered before she asked. "They're here," he said. "Your cousin's men, camped on the ridge." Her jaw clenched. "If they're here, he's close. Maybe. Or maybe they're here to see if you're still breathing." Luke removed his hat, set it on the table, and leaned his rifle against the wall. His voice was steady. "Either way, from now on, you don't step outside without me." Naelli stood slowly, her hand brushing the edge of the coat he'd given her. She didn't argue. She understood. The day passed in quiet preparation. They split more wood, patched the roof's seam, and checked the horse's tack. Both moved like people who knew what waited. Luke kept the rifle close, propped against the table when he ate, laid across the saddle when he stepped outside. Naelli's eyes tracked the windows, her hand brushing the rifle stock as if it had been hers all along. That night, as the fire sank low, Naelli asked the question that had sat between them since the beginning. "Why don't you walk away? You could ride out, leave me to whatever comes." Luke didn't look up from the rifle he was cleaning. His voice was calm, almost too plain. "Because leaving you would make me the kind of man I've spent years hating. And I won't be that man." Naelli studied him in the dim light, her breathing even. She didn't reply, but something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but something closer. When she finally lay back, her eyes stayed on him until they closed. And Luke knew that whatever storm was coming, he wasn't facing it alone anymore. They came back under moonlight. Luke heard them before he saw them, the muted thud of hooves on frozen soil, careful, trying not to carry. He was at the window when the first shadow crossed the yard. 5 riders spread wide, circling the cabin, like wolves testing a pen. "They're here," Luke said, his voice low. Naelli rose from the bed without hesitation, rifle already in her hands. Her eyes were sharp, her jaw tight, every inch of her steady. She crossed the room in 2 strides, joining him at the side window. "Do we wait for them to get close?" she asked. "We let them think they've got us," Luke said. "Then we make sure they don't get any closer." He doused the lamp, leaving only the faint orange glow from the stove. The cabin sank into half dark, shadows long against the walls. Outside, a voice carried from the yard, calm, almost friendly. "Luke." "Harland. Last chance. Hand her over, and no one gets hurt." Luke raised his voice just enough to carry. "You've already done your hurting. There won't be any here tonight." Silence stretched. Then the cousin's voice sharpened. "Then we take her." The first rider moved from the dark, hooves crunching against frozen soil. Luke steadied the rifle, exhaled, and fired. The shot cracked the night wide open. The rider dropped hard, body twisting into the dirt. Chaos erupted. Hooves scrambled, curses shouted. From the side window, Naelli's shot rang out, sharp and clean. Another rider jerked back with a scream, his horse bolting. The cousin's voice rose above it all, cold and hard. "You think you can shoot your way out of this?" Luke chambered another round, his tone flat. "Not thinking, just doing." 2 more shadows surged forward. Luke fired once, Naelli again. Horses screamed, one rider tumbling, another dragging behind his mount. The smell of powder filled the cabin, acrid and sharp. The cousin stayed mounted at the edge of the yard, his silhouette carved against the moonlight. He didn't fire. He didn't need to. His voice carried like steel. "This isn't finished. You've made your choice, and you'll pay for it." Luke kept his rifle steady, tracking the shape until the riders pulled back toward the ridge. Hooves pounded, fading into the night until only silence remained. Slowly, Luke lowered the rifle. His breath came steady, controlled, though the tremor of battle still lived in his blood. Naelli stood with her rifle firm in her hands, chest rising and falling, eyes hard but alive. She turned to him, her voice quiet, but certain. "They'll be back. Not tonight," Luke said. He crossed to the stove, stoked the fire higher. "And next time they'll know we're not the easy mark they thought." She studied him in the glow, her grip still tight on the rifle. Finally, she exhaled, setting it down with careful hands. "You didn't have to fight for me." Luke met her eyes, voice plain. "Yeah, I did." For the first time since he cut her from the post, she let herself smile, small, weary, but real. By dawn, the ground outside told the story. Hoofprints gouged deep into frozen soil, blood dark against churned earth. Luke studied it in the cold light, noting how the tracks split. 3 riders south, 2 west. The cousin hadn't gone far. He was regrouping. Inside, Naelli sat at the table, cleaning the rifle she had fired the night before. Her hands were steady, every motion careful, deliberate. She had been up before him, he could tell. Her eyes lifted when he stepped in, sharp, knowing. "You're going after them," she said. Luke shook his head. "Not we, me." Her gaze sharpened. "You think I'll sit here, waiting to hear if you come back?" "No. If he sees me standing against him with this rifle, it ends different. It ends right." Luke studied her for a long moment. He saw no fear in her eyes, only resolve. He gave a single nod. Then we end it together. The decision bound them, tighter than any words of trust could. When they rode out just after sunrise, the wind cut sharp across the flats, carrying the faint smoke of a campfire ahead. The trail led straight south. Luke's hand stayed close to the rifle, his eyes on the horizon. Naelli rode beside him, her father's fire in her eyes, the weight of vengeance balanced against survival. She had been left to die as prey. Now she was riding to finish it. They found the camp by the smell of smoke and the gleam of steel. The sun had only just cleared the horizon when Luke and Naelli spotted it, a thin plume rising against the canyon wall, 2 horses tied to a pinyon pine, and a third man seated apart, a rifle laid across his lap. Even at a distance, Naelli's breath caught. "That's his," she said. Her voice was low but iron-strong. "My father's Springfield." Luke reined in, studying the ground, measuring the angles. The cousin sat tall, broad through the shoulders, his hair bound with leather, every inch a man used to giving orders. His men crouched near the fire, heads snapping up as the horses approached. Luke's voice was calm. "We get the rifle. We end this here." They dismounted 100 yards out, moving in slow, silent steps through the rocks. At 30 yards, Luke stepped out first, rifle raised, steady as stone. "Set the rifle down," he called. "Step away from the fire." The cousin looked up, his expression caught between surprise and scorn. Slowly he stood, his hand resting on the Springfield. "You should have stayed in your cabin, Harland," he said. "This was never your fight." "Maybe," Luke answered, "but I don't like waiting for trouble to knock twice." From the rocks behind him, Naelli stepped into view. The moment her cousin saw her, his jaw clenched. "You should be dead," he spat. "You wanted me dead," she replied, voice sharp as flint. "You lied, you stole, and now you'll answer for it." Luke's rifle didn't waver. "The Springfield." "On the ground, now." The cousin's men shifted uneasily, hands brushing their sidearms, but one glance at Luke's rifle froze them. The cousin laughed once, short and hard, but something in Naelli's eyes stopped him. Slowly, he set the Springfield on the dirt and stepped back. Naelli walked forward, steady, every step deliberate. She picked up the rifle, checked the chamber, and slung it over her shoulder like it had never left her hands. "My father's," she said simply. Her cousin's jaw tightened. "You've made your choice," he told her. "Don't expect to come back." "I'm not coming back," Naelli said. Her voice did not waver. "I have a home now." For a long moment, silence hung over the canyon. Then Luke spoke, voice plain and final. "You come within 10 miles of that cabin again, you won't ride away." The cousin's eyes burned, but he knew the truth of it. He gave a slow nod, anger locked in his jaw. "We'll see," he muttered. Then he signaled his men. They mounted, slow and deliberate, riding off into the flats. Luke and Naelli watched until the dust settled and the camp lay empty but for the dying fire. Only then did Luke lower his rifle. His breath came steady, but his eyes stayed hard on the horizon. Naelli stood beside him, her father's rifle across her shoulder, her face drawn tight but alive. For the first time, she did not look hunted. She looked whole. The ride back was quiet, but not heavy. Something had shifted between them in that canyon, an unspoken bond forged in the fire of choice and defiance. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was low, washing the canyon walls in gold. Inside, Luke set the fire going while Naelli leaned the Springfield in the corner by the bed. She turned to him, her voice firm, without hesitation. "I'm staying, not because I owe you, because I want to." Luke studied her, silent for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Then we'll make this place ours." The words hung between them, not as promise but as truth. That night, as the shutters closed and the fire steadied, they sat at the table together, sharing bread and coffee. The threats were gone, for now. The ridge was quiet. The wolves were only another sound far off in the dark. For the first time since they met, there was nothing left to decide. Only the work ahead. Only the home they would keep. The ground outside told the story before a word was spoken. Hoof gouges cut deep into frozen dirt. Churned soil marked where men had fallen. The trail split, some riders scattering south, others west, proof that Naelli's cousin had retreated, but not surrendered. Luke studied it in the pale light, jaw tight. He knew men like that. If they weren't buried, they weren't done. Inside, Naelli sat at the table, the Springfield rifle across her lap. She moved with quiet focus, oiling the stock, running her hand along the worn wood. Her father's rifle was hers again, and the way she held it made clear she would never lose it twice. When Luke stepped back in, she looked up. "You're going after them," she said. He shook his head. "Not me. Us. If we leave them breathing, they'll circle back until one of us is gone." Her eyes searched his, but she didn't argue. She nodded once. "Then we finish it together." They rode out at sunrise, the cold wind cutting across the flats. The smoke of a campfire carried faint on the breeze. Within an hour they spotted the ridge, 3 horses tied near a rock wall, 2 men at the fire, and one apart, the cousin, his shoulders square, his jaw set, waiting. Luke leveled his rifle. "This ends here." Naelli stepped forward, Springfield, balanced in her grip. Her voice carried steady, sharp as steel. "You stole what was mine. You tried to bury me with lies." "I won't run again," the cousin sneered. "You think that rifle makes you your father's heir? You're nothing." Her shot cracked before his words were done, fired into the ground at his feet, dust spraying up. Her eyes burned. "I am not nothing, and I am not yours to command." The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. The cousin read the truth in her eyes and saw no room left for fear. Luke's voice came plain, final. "Ride now, and you live. Come back, and you don't." For a long breath, no one moved. Then the cousin spat in the dirt, turned his horse, and rode. His men followed, dust trailing, fading across the horizon. By the time Luke and Naelli returned to the cabin, the sun was warm against the canyon wall. She leaned the Springfield in the corner, then turned to him with a voice that carried no hesitation. "I'm staying, not for debt, not for shelter, because I choose to." Luke met her eyes, his answer simple. "Then we'll make this place ours." That night, as firelight filled the cabin, they sat side by side, bread and coffee between them. The danger had passed. The wolves were only voices far off in the dark, and for the first time since either had spoken a word, there was peace. And so the story was told, how a drifting cowboy stopped for wolves and found something worth standing for. Naelli was no longer prey. Luke was no longer alone. Together, they built more than a cabin in the canyon. They built a home, a bond stronger than lies, and a life carved from survival and choice. Because in the end, the West remembered those who stood when others walked away.